I will give $100 million to whoever gets me out of here.
You for real or what, Holmes?
The movie starts in Los Angeles. A group of police officers are caught in a fierce gunfight with 4 robbers who just held up a bank in Lincoln Heights. While 2 of the robbers stay inside to keep an eye on the hostages, the other 2 are outside, armed with automatic rifles and full body armor, engaging the police in a brutal firefight. Their superior firepower gives them the upper hand over the police, who are only carrying handguns. Fortunately, the SWAT team arrives on the scene shortly after. Officers Jim and Brian descend from a helicopter with 2 other men, landing on the bank's rooftop. They enter the storage room and use special spy cameras to find a safe route to the lobby. Meanwhile, several SWAT snipers position themselves on a rooftop across the street, while a 3rd team approaches the bank from the ground. At that moment, one of the robbers outside attempts to flee in a getaway car, but a sniper takes him out with a single shot. The other robber continues firing at the police, but the ground team quickly locates and subdues him. Inside the bank, the remaining 2 robbers start to panic. The ground team sends a secure call for the SWAT negotiator to try and arrange the release of the hostages. While the negotiator talks to the robbers, Lieutenant Velasquez calls the team inside the bank, instructing them to hold their position. However, Brian ignores the order. He heads into the storage room, and Jim, having no other choice, follows him. Brian sneaks toward the back of the main lobby, preparing to take out the robbers. Despite repeated calls from Velasquez, Brian refuses to respond. Growing increasingly anxious, one of the robbers grabs a woman, holding a gun to her head and threatening to kill her. Seeing this, Brian takes the shot, hitting the robber in the shoulder and killing him. Jim then takes out the final robber, bringing the situation to an end. Afterward, Jim checks on the injured woman and calls for an ambulance. When Brian asks if the woman will be okay, Jim snaps at him, clearly upset over Brian's reckless actions. Later, back at the precinct, Captain Fuller is furious with Jim and Brian for disobeying orders, especially since the injured woman is now planning to sue them for negligence.
I'm suing the city for millions.
Fuller fires them from the SWAT team, but Velasquez steps in, urging him to at least keep them on the team, giving them a chance to earn their jobs back eventually. Fuller agrees but demotes them to cage duty, a humiliating position that involves maintaining and distributing weapons and equipment to other officers. Brian is insulted and voices his frustration to Fuller.
I said this is bullshit. Really?
But this only makes things worse, leading him to lose his temper in a fit of rage. While Jim hesitates, Fuller gives him an opportunity. If Jim agrees to reveal Brian's reckless behavior, he could return to the team immediately. Meanwhile, Brian decides to quit and begins packing his things. Suddenly, Jim admits that he agrees with Fuller's assessment, that Brian acted recklessly during the mission, which sparks an argument. Brian accuses Jim of betraying him.
You rat me out.
And before leaving, he slams Jim's head into a mirror. 6 months later, Jim continues his training during his free time, but at work, he remains stuck in the gun cage, performing menial tasks for other officers. One day, Sergeant Hondo visits the precinct and asks Jim to repair his customized M4 rifle. Jim notices the unique modifications and is impressed. Hondo then meets with Velasquez to discuss the growing number of critical articles about the LAPD, which have led the chief to order a reform of the department. Velasquez wants Hondo to form a new SWAT team under his command and offers him 2 of his own officers, TJ and Michael. Hondo accepts them and decides to select 3 more candidates from personnel files, though Fuller will have the final say. After completing the work on Hondo's weapon, Jim returns home to find his girlfriend packing up to move out of their apartment. She tells him their relationship hasn't been the same since he was removed from the SWAT team. She tries to kiss him one last time, but he refuses, letting her leave. The next day at work, word spreads that Jim invented a new device during his time in the cage, which he plans to patent in the future. A massive hook and chain designed to tear down walls or barricades and end hostile standoffs, which he calls the key to the city. As Jim explains his invention to his cage partner, Hondo walks in and expresses admiration for Jim's idea.
We waltzed right in and surprised the bad guy, right?
Retrieving his weapon, Hondo is impressed by the modifications Jim made to it. Later, Hondo brings some officers to the shooting range for target practice. TJ manages to beat Hondo, so Hondo bets $200 that Jim can outshoot TJ. Accepting the challenge, TJ faces off against Jim, but in the end, Jim wins, much to everyone's surprise, except for Hondo. Meanwhile, French mobster Alex arrives in Los Angeles, where security almost confiscates his knife, but he manages to keep it by claiming it's a family heirloom. After being welcomed by his men and receiving a fake passport, Alex heads to a local restaurant to visit his uncle, pretending it's a surprise birthday visit. However, Alex knows that his uncle has been stealing money from the family for some time. After sharing a meal together, Alex quickly kills his uncle with the knife. He then leaves the restaurant alone and drives off. Eventually, Alex is pulled over by the police due to a broken taillight. Since the car belongs to his uncle, and there's an active arrest warrant out for him, Alex is taken into custody for questioning and identity verification. He tries to bribe the officers to get out of the situation, but it doesn't work, and Alex is placed in a holding cell. Meanwhile, back with Hondo, he recruits Jim to be his driver for the day as they search for new team members. Their first stop is Officer Deke, who they spot chasing a suspect on foot. As the two men sprint through the streets, Hondo and Jim decide to join in the pursuit, running several blocks until they manage to catch the suspect. This irritates Deke, who wanted to handle it alone. However, he calms down when Hondo invites him to join the team. Next, they visit another candidate, a vegan who's far too polite and rigid to last long in Hondo's squad, leaving a bad first impression. They then move on to a subway cop named Chris, who has repeatedly applied and qualified for the SWAT team, but has been rejected due to several misconduct complaints filed with Internal Affairs. They hear that Chris is at the local emergency room and find his partner keeping an eye on a thug with multiple bruises on his face, a gift from Chris.
Bad day, huh?
Kiss my ass.
Hondo approaches the cop, only to realize that Chris is a woman, as Chris is short for Christina. This leads Hondo to suspect that Fuller might have excluded Chris from the SWAT list because of her gender, and that the misconduct complaints were just an excuse. Especially when Chris explains that most of the allegations against her come from violent male criminals who can't handle being roughed up by a female officer. Hondo quickly takes a liking to her and offers her a position on his team.
So you still want to work SWAT?
When they return to headquarters, Jim asks Hondo if he's just going to keep dragging him around for the day, or if he's really going to tell him why he's part of this recruitment process. Hondo asks Jim if he wants to join the team. When Jim hesitates, knowing Fuller wouldn't approve, Hondo asks if he's given up on Brian.
You give him up in Fuller's office?
Jim says he hasn't, so Hondo gives him the final spot on the team. Later, during a meeting to discuss the team, Fuller predictably rejects Chris and Jim, but Hondo refuses to back down.
Other leaders get to pick their teams.
Fuller then offers a compromise. He'll accept the current team, but if they fail to pass the initial SWAT tests, Chris will return to her subway duties, and both Jim and Hondo will be removed from the unit. Hondo agrees, confident that his new team will succeed. Training begins soon after, and the team members get to know each other. It's revealed that Jim's ex-girlfriend is Michael's sister, and there's tension between them because Michael believes Jim wronged her. The two nearly come to blows before being separated by the others. Hondo puts the team through a series of tests, ranging from infiltration, armor, weapons, physical training, and long-range shooting. While there are some struggles at first, they eventually perform well. During sniper training, targeting playing cards, the team demonstrates exceptional marksmanship. They also practice simulated exercises, infiltrating empty buildings, and learning how to work together to rescue hostages rather than risk losing them. A few days later, it's time for the final evaluation, which includes a simulated hostage scenario. They'll have to infiltrate a plane hijacked by terrorists, with their colleagues playing the hijackers and armed with paintball guns. The goal is to regain control of the plane by eliminating all the hijackers within 8 minutes. While studying the layout of the plane, Jim notices an alternative entry point no one else would think of. A small elevator shaft used to place food trays, too narrow for anyone to fit through, except for Chris. The team drives their vehicle under the plane and starts drilling a hole into the fuselage, while one member climbs onto the roof, preparing to enter through a window. As Chris crawls into the elevator shaft, the others find a hatch and detect a trap before it can be activated. Seconds later, they neutralize the threat and count to 3 before launching their attack. Spreading out across the plane, the team quickly takes down all 6 hijackers with rapid shots, without losing a single hostage, though TJ takes a hit that would have been fatal if it were real. Much to Fuller's irritation, the new team sets a record for the exercise. That night, the group celebrates over dinner at a cafe run by Deke's father. After a few hours of eating and drinking, most of the team heads home, except for Chris and Jim, who go to Jim's favorite bar. While they share more drinks, They're interrupted by Brian, who exchanges hostile remarks with Jim before storming out.
Glad to see all that butt kissing's really paid off.
On his way out, Brian smashes a framed photo of himself and Jim against the wall. Back to Jim, he tries to make a move on Chris, but she rejects him before inviting him to her daughter's birthday party. Meanwhile, Alex attempts to hire a lawyer, but she is unable to help him, and soon he is transferred. The next day, the team enjoys their day off. Hondo and Velasquez play golf. Deke spends time with his kids, Michael stays home with his wife, and Jim attends Chris's daughter's birthday party, entertaining the children with water guns. However, everyone's fun is interrupted by an emergency call. There's a Polish hostage situation, where a man has barricaded himself inside his house, firing randomly out the windows. The man claims to have rigged all entrances with explosives. Although no one believes him, Velasquez refuses to take the risk. Jim suggests using his invention, the key to the city, and they use it to tear down the back wall of the house, subduing the suspect and ending the standoff in seconds. Later, in the sheriff's office, a deputy uncovers information about Alex's true identity. The intel is sent to Velasquez, who orders Hondo's team to intercept and escort the prison bus carrying Alex. Meanwhile, Alex's crew learns about the transfer and sends two men disguised as cops who use a stolen police car to pull over the bus. They then climb aboard, open fire on the guards, and free Alex. Just as they're about to drive off, Hondo's team arrives and blocks the street, but the criminals open fire, triggering a shootout. As civilians flee in panic, the team quickly takes out all the fake cops. When Alex tries to escape in the stolen police car, they shoot at it until it crashes, and they recapture Alex. It is later revealed that Alex is an international fugitive, wanted in over a dozen countries for crimes including murder, arms trafficking, and smuggling. Journalists are closely following the case, and as Alex is taken to the holding cell, he seizes the opportunity to address the cameras, offering a $100 million reward to anyone who can break him out of prison. Every news channel replays his statement repeatedly, confirming that Alex has the financial resources to back his promise.
The family's fortune is estimated in the billions of dollars,
Drawing the attention of every criminal in Los Angeles. Hondo's team feels frustrated, knowing this will only make their job harder. The team then moves Alex to the rooftop, planning to evacuate him via helicopter. But just as the helicopter is about to reach them, it is suddenly hit by an unseen sniper. The helicopter spirals out of control, crashing into the street below where it explodes. The team quickly takes Alex back inside and devises a new plan. They will transport the criminal via a convoy. They set off in cars and on motorcycles, ignoring the mobs of crazed fans trying to get Alex's attention. When they are forced to stop as a homeless man slowly crosses the road, it turns out to be a trap. A gang quickly ambushes the police. As trucks ram into police cars, other criminals open fire and throw smoke grenades, killing one motorcycle officer and injuring two others. However, when they reach Alex, they find only a doll. It turns out the vehicles are a decoy, and Alex has been moved through an underground private passage into an unmarked car parked a few blocks away from headquarters, with Velasquez providing aerial surveillance. Miles away, Hondo's plan is going smoothly, despite Alex taunting them with insults and offers of money.
66 million for each of you.
As they pass through a second checkpoint, TJ suddenly stops the car, pointing his gun at the rest of the team. He has decided to take Alex up on his offer. Jim and Michael try to reason with him,
TJ, what the hell are you doing?
but TJ reveals that he has already joined forces with Brian, who then shoots Michael, revealing himself as the mastermind behind the entire plot to capture Alex. After handcuffing Jim to the car, TJ and Brian flee into the subway with Alex. Soon after, the rest of the team arrives, freeing Jim and calling for medics to treat Michael. They decided to split up again, with Hondo and Jim following closely behind, while Deke and Sanchez rush to the next station. Unfortunately, Hondo and Jim missed the train. However, Deke and Chris reported that the train never arrived at the next stop, prompting both teams to head to the end of the tunnel for investigation. They discovered that the train had been abandoned midway through the tunnel, with Brian and his crew already gone, leaving behind terrified passengers. The driver pointed them toward a storm drain which the team entered, cutting them off from police frequencies. Meanwhile, Fuller uncovered TJ's betrayal and Brian's involvement, suspecting that the entire team might be in on Alex's escape, especially since they had stopped responding. When Fuller discovered an unauthorized runway had been lit up at Hawthorne Airport, he suspected Brian was heading there and sent all available units to intercept. As the team tracked the criminals through some sewer tunnels, avoiding bats along the way, Brian set up a trap with claymore mines and smoke grenades, much to TJ's dislike. Hondo's team pressed forward, undeterred by the smoke, and just as Deke was about to trigger the trap, Jim stopped him in time. While Jim disarmed the claymore, Brian's team reached the end of the tunnel, locking the heavy door behind them as they left the area. Eventually, Hondo's team reached the locked door, but Jim was able to blow it open with a breaching charge. With their communication back online, Hondo briefed Fuller on the situation, requesting transport. However, Fuller, no longer trusting Hondo, ordered the team to abort the mission. Hondo ignored the command, and his team commandeered a passing luxury car. As they sped off, Chris noticed a low-flying jet plane overhead, realizing that the plane must be Brian's plan to evacuate Alex, and that the airport was just a decoy. The team immediately followed the plane, which was now landing on the 6th Street Bridge. Brian and his men quickly took the terrified plane owner hostage, boarded the aircraft, and prepared to flee. The team drove the luxury car onto the bridge, and when two of the criminals fired shots to detonate roadblocks, Hondo didn't hesitate. He drove straight through them. The police opened fire, trying to stop the plane, and when that didn't work, Hondo rammed the plane's landing gear before it could take off, causing the plane to crash. Another firefight broke out between the SWAT team and Brian's men, during which Chris was shot in the shoulder. Alex tried to escape, but Deke chased him down on foot and quickly recaptured him. Brian used a hostage as cover to safely exit the plane and then dangled from the side of the bridge, with Jim following close behind. Meanwhile, Hondo confronted a wounded TJ, who expressed regret for his actions and inquired about Michael. After Hondo assured him that Michael was expected to recover, TJ drew a gun and ended his own life. Back with Jim, he descended the bridge and landed in a rail yard. Brian suddenly ambushed him, stabbing his hand before running off. Jim chased him, and after dodging a few passing trains, the two engaged in hand-to-hand combat. They slammed into each other on the tracks, and just as a train approached, Jim kicked Brian's head onto the rails, killing him instantly. After rejoining his team on the bridge, Fuller arrived and congratulated everyone on a job well done, but he also reminded them that the work wasn't over yet. Alex was still in custody and needed to be transferred to federal prison, so the team loaded him into the SWAT truck to hand him over to the authorities. Sometime later, after successfully delivering Alex, the police unit received a report of an ongoing robbery. Hondo pointed out that technically their shift had ended 12 hours ago, but the exhausted team still agreed to head to the next mission.